You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a trunk, just like Jim. It's more to life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more to life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club, buy some bottles, impress them girls. It's more to life.
Fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we're back. We're back. Had a little bit of a break there, a holiday, a vacation there due to the holidays. And speaking of evenings, talking about Happy New Year's Eve to everyone out there. And just say it one more time: Merry Christmas, and I hope everyone had a happy holiday. And I hope New Year's is good for everyone. But since our little hiatus, our little vacation break in between, there's been a lot happening with the New Orleans Saints here. Not a whole lot of positive, but there's still a lot happening, and we're coming up quick to Week 18 and the end of the season for the Saints, who aren't going to make the playoffs this year at least. But let's get into this because we gotta talk about. Go back to the Green Bay Packers game, to where there's like literally like nothing positive to talk about that, and then we'll just get back to the Las Vegas Raiders game and just kind of the stats on how that game went and why it went the way it went. But let's just get into a little bit of the stuff from previous podcasts talking about the Green Bay Packers and kind of what our takes on that game beforehand, and how those ended up landing, or how any of those predictions ended up after that. What what was it, the 34-0 loss to the Green Bay Packers? But anyways, let's do this. So can I get a menu? And so first thing, we're talking about the Saints versus the Green Bay Packers, where it was a game that, I mean, it should have been kind of known that the Saints really had no chance of winning that game. The only way that they would have had of winning that game is like if it maybe was like a snowstorm, keeping it to where they couldn't throw the ball, and some crazy turnovers here and there to get New Orleans some opportunities that they usually otherwise wouldn't have, but that they didn't get any of that in this game. Just pretty much terrible from start to finish in this game. See, I picked an MVP for this. I picked Brian Bresee to get a sack, to add another sack to his like 7.5 sack total, and I was going off of, they had a sack, 8 sacks the week prior against the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, and then the last two games, the Green Bay Packers and the Las Vegas Raiders, they have one, and they didn't have any in this game. So I picked Brian Bresee to be my MVP, but really can't pick him to do that because he didn't have any sacks or tackles for loss or anything like that. Can't really, just because of it's a 34-0 game, you really can't pick anyone as being an MVP. No Saints player played good in this game, so I just can't even go over any MVPs. And this game was just so embarrassing. I would have never guessed until like up and afterwards of the game that the Saints were the first team to get shut out all season. How embarrassing is that? The only thing that fixed that and eased the pain, I guess, a little bit of that is then the next week. Just like a couple days later, the Baltimore Ravens beat the Houston Texans 31-2, and that was the first team to just score 2 points all year, I think, is Houston. And then Seattle beat Chicago 6-3, and I think that's the first game all year where there hasn't been a touchdown scored. So that eases the pain a little bit for for being the first of things. So seeing some of those embarrassing losses from some other teams as well, but at least it's something that should have been expected in playing against the Green Bay Packers. I mean, playing Green Bay Packers Monday night in Green Bay and frigid temperatures against a team that's relatively healthy, has a franchise quarterback. Like, what did you really expect to happen? And then for my hot take for this, I was hoping that maybe Spencer Rattler would be a little more consistent. He's just kind of had these quarters, where he had a little bit of an explosion, scored 27 points against the Rams in the second, not the Rams, but the Buccaneers in the second quarter weeks back. Scored what 13 points in the fourth quarter against the Commanders, but then just get shut out in all the other quarters. So was hoping to see that kind of continue with Spencer Rattler, still being able to avoid sacks and maybe be more consistent in how his points are kind of spread out. Don't just have these one quarter or one half where you look good. Maybe see if you could start the game looking good and see if you can carry that throughout the whole game. Well, that didn't happen in the Green Bay game. Didn't even come close to that. And talking about how they got, I think they had they had uh, 8 sacks against the Commanders the week before, and even though Spencer Rattler only played in half of that game, wasn't sacked at all in that game. But in these last two games, just similar to them getting sacks, it's just like the complete opposite. Is then they started giving up sacks. I think they gave up 3 against Green Bay and four against the Raiders. So they gave up 7. So basically 7-1, and just yeah, they only got the one from Cam Jordan against the Raiders. So yeah, that hot take didn't hit. Didn't see them being consistent at any point in the game. Just never. I don't think they never got inside the 30 more than like twice. They got like in around the 30-yard line of Green Bay like twice, but never even in the red zone. So yeah, that was, people talk about it can't get any worse, or the Saints' original loss to the Carolina Panthers, the second game against them, and that first loss against the Panthers was like the worst moment of the season or the lowest point of the season, and now I can't get any worse. It can always get worse, and there's a perfect example of how it can always get worse. You can always be the first team of the season to get shut out. All right, and now for my pick and score for the Saints versus Green Bay Packers, New Orleans Saints versus Green Bay Packers game. I mean, kind of obvious. It shouldn't have been out of like any surprise to anyone that I picked the Packers to win this game, and it wasn't really far off of what I expected for the Saints' defensive output, but just the fact that they couldn't get any semblance of anything going. Even watching that game, like in the last couple possessions the Saints had, you're just kind of like holding hope that they can maybe at least get in field goal range to where they don't get shut out. But I predicted the Packers to win this anyways by 31 points. I expected the defense not to do all that well, but I was hoping that the Saints would maybe fall backwards into 10 points, but no, they just got shut out. So that was my prediction, was 31-10 Packers. And I knew the Saints probably didn't have much of a chance of this game, not necessarily because of Jordan Love, who's a franchise quarterback who didn't really have that great of a game. But I knew like Josh Jacobs, he's one of those top tier, top 10 running backs in the league and elite running backs. I knew the Saints were in trouble because since Darren Rizzi's taken over, their run defense has been a little bit better, but it's the ass end has kind of fell out of it the last 2 weeks, allowing like 88 yards rushing to the Packers, and then like 155 to the Raiders, and like 100 for the first time in like 18 games or something like that to the Las Vegas Raiders. Amira Abdullah looking like Adrian Peterson out there against the Saints defense. So to accumulate the score that the Packers did, I figured that they would end up running the ball, and there'd be like no reason really for them to do anything but run the ball against the Saints, who have just shown that they're at stopping the run, and then just they're terrible at missed tackles and uh, yards after catch, because that's really where Jordan Love ate the Saints up. Like, he didn't really have that great a game, but he was killing them with check downs and run after catch, and obviously they rushed for 188 yards. But yeah, so the pick that the Packers won the game 34-0 isn't much of a surprise, but still a little embarrassing. Would have been nice to at least get 3 points and not just look helpless at the end of the game. But so they carried that over. So that's the Saints versus Packers game. So that's moving towards 3 weeks ago. But now, just on this past Sunday, this was the Saints' final home game. This was Sunday, December 29th, 2024, and that was at noon. Uh, this was a game that I'm a little surprised. I was a little surprised that Derek Carr didn't end up playing in this game. I was saying a lot of times on some previous podcasts that I won't believe that Derek Carr is officially hurt or officially done for the season until I see that he's not suited up for this game against the Raiders. And lo and behold, he didn't suit up for them, and they're still saying he's got like two different parts in his wrist. In his wrist, he's got a part that's broken, and then a part in his hand that's broken, and then there's some nerve damage. And I guess they tried to shoot it up, and it just I couldn't simulate a game even after having it all wrapped up and shot up. So after hearing that news, if I had heard that news, if I'd have done my predictions, like my MVPs and hot takes and picks, I probably would have still picked I would have picked the Raiders to win. More than likely, I definitely wouldn't have given them as much of a chance. And I'm honestly glad that Derek Carr didn't play in this game, because with the uh, crew and assets and team around him in this game, even with Derek Carr being the quarterback last Sunday against the Raiders, I still could have seen them lose. So having Derek Carr not lose to his former team, the Raiders, and being the first quarterback in NFL history to have lost to every 32 teams, for the Saints to not be in connection to that, I would be really perfectly fine with it. So that went the way it did is fine. But let's get into some of these stats, because let's see. So yeah, for just the stats, this game was kind of similar to kind of all the past previous games with Spencer Rattler, where he has one quarter where he looks kind of good, and they were able to put up some points, and that was the second quarter where they had the crazy throwback pass for was a 30-yard touchdown pass on like a throwback trick play to Foster Monroe, which got them up seven seven 7-3 in this game, and then they were able to just add a chip shot field goal at the end of the first half. But after that, they really just weren't able to do anything again. Kind of going back to kind of what I was talking about with the game against Green Bay, and just if they could start out scoring points like from the first quarter to the end of the game, and not just have these little explosions where they look good and then they just kind of disappear and you don't hear them, and no one around. No one around Spencer Rattler's playing good, and then he starts making rookie mistakes and things like that. So at least we got some points. At least early in the second quarter, at least we got some points. A touchdown off of Foster Monroe and Juwan Johnson, now both the tight ends. It seems like the last couple of weeks, Spencer Rattler has kind of been more realizing he doesn't have anything at wideout, but targeting his tight ends a little bit better. So that was good to just see a little bit of positive, I guess, in the first half, or just the second quarter, really. But let's just go through team stats here, because this explains a lot of this game. What we'll see here, and why this game went the direction it went. So just first downs, Las Vegas has 22 to the Saints 13. So that right there is just a huge indicator. And then we were talking about how the Packers had ran for a lot of yards, and that was probably more than anything, besides being in the frozen tundra, Lambeau field, and playing outside during freezing temperature. More that if they can't stop the run, they're not going to be able to beat Green Bay. Well, they couldn't stop the run against the Las Vegas Raiders either, who had 38 carries for 156 yards, but no touchdowns. But that 150 plus yards rushing on the Saints is a good way to lead to a win with the Saints. And then the Saints only had 13 rushes for 81 yards and no touchdowns. And I mean, half of that was, yeah, 3 carries for 46 yards and a long of 28 was Spencer Rattler. So majority of those rushing yards was from Spencer Rattler. Didn't get a whole lot of help from Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Kendra Miller, has got a concussion now. I guess has dealt with a concussion, came out of that game with a concussion. But I guess thankfully, I mean, there's no happiness or a celebration about someone having a head injury, but at least it's not an ankle or a hamstring injury, which seems to have been somewhat of a chronic issue for Kendra Miller coming into the season. But yeah, I mean, you could just see uh, that Spencer Rattler is not going to have uh, that great of a time or that good of a game when he's not getting any help at all from his running game, which that's exactly what you've seen the last 2 weeks that the Saints opponents have benefited from a great running game. Jordan Love, Aiden O'Connell, who had a great game actually, low key had a really good game. Aiden O'Connell did was 20 for 35, 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that the Saints made Aiden O'Connell look like a Pro Bowl or a veteran quarterback. Pretty bad, honestly, to see that one of the quarterbacks that had one of the best games against them is Aiden O'Connell. That stings a little bit. And so we just talked about his passing numbers. And then Spencer Rattler was 20 for 36 for 218 yards, 1 touchdown, but then the two interceptions, which both of them really hurt. They had the 2 interceptions, and both of them came after like a big play by the Saints. The Saints would make a big play, and then the next thing you know, it's some kind of procedural penalty, a legal shift, a legal man downfield, holding, like every time after a big play, either a big play or even a touchdown getting called back in this game. If it wouldn't have been for that, if the offensive line would have played better and some of his receivers wouldn't have dropped so many passes, I mean, he probably would have had more similar numbers to Aiden O'Connell, but didn't get any help from any of his teammates. And then sacks, we have sacks and yards. Cam Jordan, he was able to get the only sack early on in the game to get a little bit of momentum swinging the Saints' way. Got a sack for a 10-yard loss, and then also blew up a running play for a TFL. So early on, it looked like the Saints had a little bit of life and energy on the defensive line, but after those first couple series, it's like the floodgates opened and just no pass rush at all for who I would say was pocket quarterback and Aiden O'Connell. And then just more sacks continued to rain down after the Green Bay game. So Spencer Rattler added 4 more in this game, 4 for 30-yard loss. And then Las Vegas had 388 total yards, and the Saints had 269. And Las Vegas, surprisingly, Saints weren't able to force a fumble and just not recover it, but they didn't fumble at all. And then New Orleans fumbled twice, but was able to recover both of them. And then just the 2 total turnovers, or the 2 interceptions by Spencer Rattler. And then probably the biggest number, and we already talked a little bit about how Spencer Rattler would make this great throw, or even a touchdown play, and then next thing you know, it's a illegal formation, a legal shift, a legal man downfield, uh, holding like every time. Well, if it wasn't penalties, and it was dropped passes. One of the interceptions uh, that Spencer Rattler threw, like bounced right off of what Kevin Austin Jr.'s hands. It was a little high, I can admit that, but still, it bounced right off of his hands and into the safety's hands for an interception. So, I mean, if it wouldn't have been for all the offensive line penalties, I definitely didn't show any discipline or or just following the rules of what their coaches laid down. Definitely no discipline or just trying to keep the game on track by not having a penalty after every decent play you make. But the fact that looking back at this and seeing this stat now, it's wild that a team that historically since what, like 2000, has always been like one of the most penalized teams in the league, in the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly the Oakland Raiders, were only penalized 3 times for 20 yards in that game. But the Saints were penalized 10 times for 85 yards, and at least 2 or 3 of those penalties took a touchdown off the board. I would say, yeah, at least 2 of those 10 penalties for 85 yards took 14 points off the board for the Saints. And then third down conversions, the Saints defense was just terrible, allowed 10 of 18 for the Rams, and the Saints offense, in contrast, was terrible. It was only 1 for 10, and the Raiders for never had to go for fourth down, and the Saints got the only one they got. And then Las Vegas had time of possession 37 minutes and 50 seconds, and then 22 minutes and 10 seconds. So getting close to having the ball 20 minutes more than New Orleans. So it's easy to see why the Raiders won, but it's hard to believe at the same time, seeing how they were a 3-12 team coming into this game, though, so that the Saints couldn't have had even just somewhat of a better performance, or a closer game would have been nice, especially seeing how when you got teams like the Raiders who have 2 or 3 losses, two or three more losses than you, coming into week weeks, yeah, week 17, week 18, like losing out isn't going to help you. The Saints are pretty much locked into the 10th pick, or they're just going to continue. If they win or certain things fall away, they may drop out of even top 10. So it's just a little frustrating that the game wasn't a little more competitive. Let's see if we can come up with any MVPs for this. Obviously, can't really pick what a pregame MVP, because I don't have the receipts of a previous podcast to say that. But we can do post game MVPs, and then same thing. Kind of can't do a hot take either. Probably kind of would have wanted to be more similar to my hot take from Green Bay, is that it'd be nice to see Spencer Rattler be more consistent and maybe score more than just 1 quarter a game. Have a couple quarters where they score a couple points, and 3 of the 4 quarters would be kind of nice, instead of just 1 quarter they score and then they're shut out the uh, rest of the game. So no real hot takes. Hot take probably would have kind of just carried over from Green Bay, and then I would have picked the Raiders. Was going to pick the would have picked once I would have found out that Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara, who hopefully Alvin Kamara comes back and gets that 50 yards against Tampa. Once I would have figured out both of them weren't playing in this game, I probably wouldn't have picked the Saints to win this game anyways. But I would have expected it to maybe be a little closer, and maybe the Saints be a little bit better in their defensive performance, maybe like a 17-14 loss to Green Bay, or not 17-14 loss to the Las Vegas Raiders is what I meant. But let's look at possible post game MVPs for this game, for defense, offense, and special teams. So I would either for offense, I would probably either go like we were talking about how the tight ends have really showed up, and that's been kind of the go-to target and the kind of the safety net kind of for Spencer Rattler the last 2 weeks. Well, I would say you'd probably be able to pick either Juwan Johnson or Foster Monroe, who had the only touchdown in that game. So Foster Monroe had the throwback 30-yard touchdown from Spencer Rattler. But he was targeted 5 times with 3 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown, and then the long of 30. And then you had Juwan Johnson, who we're talking about being a safety net and being targeted and being the favorite target for Spencer Rattler now. Maybe main reason because the only targets left really, definitely the only veteran presence in Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson. But he was targeted 10 times in this game for 6 catches, where it was 6 receptions for 66 yards, no touchdowns, a long of 25, and then a fumble that was recovered. But of those 10 targets with only 6 receptions, at least he had 1 or 2 drops. But I would probably pick for post game MVPs, offensive MVPs. I'd just go with the tight end group: Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, and then the defense kind of like against the Packers. There's not much positive to look at or MVPs to pick off of defense or special teams from a game like that. But the only player that really was making any plays early in this game, early in the first quarter, and kind of got the Saints off on the right foot there because they were able to kind of upend the first couple drives of the Raiders. Cameron Jordan would be surprisingly would be my defensive post game MVP for this game because he had a sack, he had 3 combined tackles with 3 solo, 2 tackles for loss. One of them being a play where he blew up a run play and a tackle for loss. But I'd give that to Cameron Jordan because then you just had a lot of garbage tackles from Demario Davis and Pete Warner, who both had 13 tackles. And then Matthew Hayball kind of had a bounce back game after kind of having a rough stretch there the last 3-4 games. Hadn't been real impressive, but he had 3 or 4 punts inside the 20 in this game. Matthew Hayball had 7 punts for 330 yards, average of 47.1, and a long of 64, and 2 of those were coffin corner kicks where they went out of bounds inside the Raiders 5. And even with those plays happening, even with those drives starting there, I think at least one of those the Raiders still drove like 85 yards and scored a touchdown on one of those drives. So even with a good day from Hayball, so I would think that's your offensive, defensive, and special teams MVPs. So the tight end group: Juwan Johnson, Foster Monroe, kind of a group reward for them, and then Cameron Jordan getting a sack and a couple TFLs, and then Matthew Hayball having kind of a get back game after not looking too great over the last couple weeks, having some shanks and just not seeming to getting enough on any of those kicks and things of that nature. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. We have just the one last game coming up. Kind of the Saints kind of possibly being the decider of who wins the NFC South, depending on if they beat the Buccaneers or if the Buccaneers beat them. It's like, do you want the Buccaneers to win the NFC South for like the 4th year in a row, or do you want the Falcons to win? Like, it's just not great options. Maybe if the Buccaneers just go all out to win that game, maybe some of their star players will end up getting hurt, and that'll carry over then to them getting into the playoffs, and they're just beat up going into the playoffs. I'd be okay with that, and then the Buccaneers still winning. But seeing the Falcons get embarrassed and Michael Penix looking like a clown and the super wild card weekend wouldn't be that bad either. But just the thought of the Falcons making the playoffs for the first time in forever is is something I'm not too fond of. But anyways, we'll be back for week 18. We'll be back for injury reports. No holidays, even though New Year's is coming up. So happy New Year's, happy New Year's Eve, and happy New Year's to the 2025 and 2024 2025 NFL season is coming to a head, a cook head. It's screeching with just the tap of those brakes. But anyways, I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?